world. This is Football Talk, and welcome to Blue Friday Hawk Talk Week 2. And man, Week 1 did not work out quite the way we thought it was going to be, but all you can do is move on from that game and look at Week 2 going against the Lions. We are going to break down a little bit of what happened to our Seahawks on Sunday, and it was not a pretty game, especially after halftime. But getting outscored 23-0 was brutal. The defense definitely didn't take the step forward that I was hoping to see. It was something I talked about really all off season. Is the linebacking core and really the front seven overall, but the defensive line and the linebacking core had to get better, had to show something that they couldn't last year, giving up all those rushing yards, everything that was across the middle and up the seams. And unfortunately, everything that we saw last year is exactly what we saw this first game. So it was a little disappointing, especially with the amount of players that they were able to bring in this offseason, whether it was free agency, through the draft. And unfortunately, it just didn't equate to the step forward that we needed to see out of that front seven. Again, they struggled to protect the middle of the field, and Stafford was able to just pick that apart. His 17 of his 24 completions were within 15 yards and inside the numbers. So it just what's happening, Mitch? Yeah, everything that they were trying to, get better on through the middle just really didn't help. 17 of 24 was within 15 yards inside the numbers. So that was the bulk of his completions. And then he still went off for, over 300 yards, which lets you know that not only were they completing those passes, but they were getting yards after the catch as well. So that was a huge problem. The Seahawks couldn't get off the field. They were giving up just under 65% on third down conversions. They went 11 for 17. So they were able to slow them down, but they weren't able to actually get themselves off the field. And then they held them under 100 yards rushing. They ended up with 92 yards, but all three of their scores came on the ground. So it wasn't necessarily like their ability to stop the run has gotten better. They just didn't need it until they got to the red zone and they were able to punch it in. So there are so many questions for this defensive front seven. And then it gets worse because we ended up having a bunch of players end up getting injured. And it was just an ugly game overall. And then amazingly, with the amount of pressure that Gino was under, especially after Abraham Lucas and Cross both get injured right at half, he only got sacked twice, but he was under constant duress. He definitely didn't have any time to throw. Our running game was okay, but again, without tackles, the blocking just isn't there. And you could see that the step from Cross and Lucas was definitely a huge step down to our second string guys. So those are definitely some things that they're going to have to try and figure out coming into this week, even with Lucas going on injured reserve. Cross didn't practice all week, still has turf toe problem. There's a lot to sort out in that front, in that offensive front there, just to be able to keep Gino upright. Fortunately for them, the Lions don't have the pass rush that, the Rams do. He's not going to have any oh my God moments because Aaron Donald is running free. So there are some elements of what happened last week that isn't going to be there coming into heading into Detroit. How's it going? And all right, Lions at home after their week 1. It's going to be tough. So this is going to be a rough matchup for a lot of reasons. It's a scenario where they played them last year. Both teams have a lot of similar attributes that they did a year ago. that being said, the Lions do have a better defense than they did then. And this one's going to be tough for the Hawks, especially not having their starting tackles. This is one I think, unfortunately, as a Hawks fan, they probably dropped this game. But, we'll see. So some of the other non-participants, obviously, Cross it was a non-participant with the toe. Lucas is on IR. We have defensive end Mike Morris with a shoulder injury, didn't practice this week. Linebacker Devin Bush didn't practice with shoulder, and linebacker Jordan Brooks with a knee. Limited practice, Jamal Adams with a knee. So he's not even back on the field, and he's already kind of injured. So that sounds like Jamal Adams. And then another linebacker, Boyamafe, with a knee as well. Fortunately, Devin Witherspoon, his hamstring injury that he's battling through, he was a full go this week, so he should be on the field. I would imagine you're going to see a couple of these guys that didn't practice on the field, but if you're not practicing, you're obviously not going to be 100% when it's game time. So add insult to injury, you have the middle of the field that they were struggling to protect, and now you're going to have guys that are banged up trying to protect the middle. This is one of the few times that I can say I hope that Jamal Adams is ready for this week for no other reason than that unit is so beat up that it would be nice to have him drop into that outside linebacker role to help stop the run. Obviously, I know he's not great in coverage, but we have other coverage guys. So you could settle into a dime style defense to include, the extra safety. That way you can still have the complement of, Michael Jackson on the outside or, Witherspoon, depending on how his hamstring is doing. You also have Kobe Bryant that can drop into that nickel spot. I could see them running a lot of dime if Jamal Adams is available, but that is questionable still. He got off the PUP list a week, ahead of last game and he didn't play. Obviously, he's practiced, but it's been limited. So, tough to say if he's going to be able to be there for game time. I honestly wouldn't hold my breath on that, but if he gets a few snaps, that would be helpful in this defense as it sits. Obviously, the secondary is still there, and although it didn't look great, the secondary were mostly playing zone, so it's not like their trail positions were way out of position or anything like that. They just didn't have the linebacker help that those defensive alignments require, so it just made it look like no one was in the right spot ever. But, again, we move on to this week, so hopefully this is one where you can just throw the tape away and move on. Not a lot that was positive to take from this game, really, other than somehow Geno didn't get sacked and didn't turn the ball over. Didn't get sacked more times. He did get sacked twice. But those are things that, you can kind of take as a small victory. But overall, after that first half, there was really not much to be happy about. All right. So some of the questions that came in are hilarious. So I'm going to start with the first one because as soon as it came in, I started laughing. And that is the Seahawks season over? It was week one. Let's calm down a little bit. Week one is a super overreaction week anyway, because so many starters don't actually play in the preseason anymore. So if you looked across the league, it was some of the sloppiest football you're going to watch, because this is the first time a lot of these starters have hit the field. And so there were interceptions and fumbles. Last night there was 4 fumbles. So insane amount of mistakes that are being made, large in part because these guys aren't playing in the preseason. They don't practice at full speed anymore. There's no hitting in OTAs. So a lot of these guys come into this season really not ready to play. It's some of the steps that I don't like the way the NFL has gone. I understand they're trying to keep injuries down and they're trying to keep hitting to a minimum, but it's part of the game. Hitting is part of the game. So you need guys that are ready to hit and able to protect the hit. Because if you're doing running back drills and people are smacking at the ball, that is not the same as somebody coming in and throwing a punch into it or putting a helmet on it. So I don't love that the league has gotten away from so much of the preseason and OTA action. So yeah, I mean, it's kind of a roundabout way to answer your question, but no, the Seahawks season isn't over after week one. It's they have a lot to fix, and I believe they can. They need some guys to get healthy. They did sign quite a few guys here this week to help with this offensive tackle issue. But yeah, it's not over. It does get a little harder from here. The schedule is tougher than it was last season. All right. Do we see Jamal Adams this week? I don't know, just because he's been limited in practice. He has kind of a new injury in his 1 week of practice here. So I don't know that you'll end up seeing him. It would be a huge benefit if we could, though, just for no other reason. He brings an athleticism that, very few other players have. Like I said before, is he great in coverage? Absolutely not. But can he make a difference on the field? Sure, he can get some pass rush in there. He's good against the run. But, with a knee injury, I don't know if they're going to try and rush him out. Last thing you need to do is have him come in, play part of a game, and then lose him for, another 4 to 6 weeks or something like that. So if he does come in, I would bet it is extraordinarily limited. Okay, so what are we doing at the tackle position? So this has been a busy week for the Hawks. So they had, on Monday, they went and added 41-year-old vet Jason Peters. They also added Greg Eland. And then yesterday, they signed 2 rookies off of practice squads around the league. So they brought in, excuse me, Raekwon O'Neal, who was on the Tampa practice squad, and McClendon Curtis on the Raiders practice squad. So this week alone, they brought in 4 offensive tackles. So they understand that they're in a bad spot, and what they had behind Lucas and Cross just weren't quite the answer they were going to need. As soon as they went down, I understand those other guys haven't gotten a lot of first team reps, but you got to be able to protect a little bit better than what they were able to do. So for them to go and sign 4 different tackles this week, it shows that they understand what they had on the roster may not be what they need. So hopefully one of those guys can step in and make a difference. I would imagine Jason Peters is probably who they're hoping. Again, as a tackle, being 41, that is extraordinarily old on a football field. I'm 42, and so that makes me sad. But that in sports worlds, that is extraordinarily old. But hopefully he'll be able to step into one of those roles there and help out. I imagine over the next week or two, it's going to be somewhat of a rotating cast, especially depending on how bad the turf toe is for Charles Cross, just because, they have to be able to move. And if he can't plant on that toe, it has to be pretty severe for him to have been out of the game anyway. So, we'll see how these guys get filtered in this week. Obviously, the rookies are not going to be the ones that are getting signed off of practice squads. I would assume that they were signed to the Seattle practice squad. And then Peters was signed to the practice squad on Monday, so he will likely be elevated for this game. And they'll need him. They'll absolutely need him. Okay, so then we got... Why does DK get so many penalties? Well, the biggest thing with DK is he can't stop talking. I have no problem with you being aggressive. And he didn't even get the penalty for just throwing that dude to the ground. He said he was, blocking, but they were way out of the play. No one was moving. But he didn't even get the flag for that. He got the flag after that because he kept running his mouth on the way back to the huddle. So, I mean, it's a 15-yarder. You almost know he's going to get one every other game at a minimum. So I don't know if it's something that just can't be coached out of him because he's done it since he's got here. And, it's unfortunate because he has an immense amount of talent, but killer. So hopefully you guys can still. All right. Sorry about that. We had a drop in the signal there. But anyway, he has an immense amount of talent. And if they could figure out how to keep him from doing that, because you can talk during the play, you can do a lot of things. Like you can even kind of dust it up a little bit during a play. But as soon as the play is over and those whistles hit, if you're still doing it, that's a 15-yarder, unsportsmanlike all day. And they're going to call it, and especially because he has a history of doing it, they're going to call it even more. So I don't know if it's something that he just can't figure out how to get around, but I feel like the coaching staff needs to be able to do something to help limit that. Because again, a 15-yarder, especially if it's already, a situation where, you're 2nd and 10, right? Or even if it's 1st and 10, if it's now 1st and 25, like that is tough. There's not a ton in your playbook for 1st and 25, let alone 3rd and, and 25. So to answer your question, I don't know. I don't know why he can't reel that in, but hopefully they can get that worked out this season because, man, it's tough to just flush one of your drives every game. So yeah, it's unfortunate. So yeah. Anyway, so then let's take a look at this Lions team. So this Lions team obviously took down the Chiefs, and there's been talk about it needing to have an asterisk because Kelsey wasn't there and Jones wasn't there. And at the end of the day, you got to play the team that's in front of you. Everybody's going to be missing guys really all year, right? So, I mean, you're going to play whoever's in front of you. Obviously, if Kelsey and Jones are there, do I think Casey wins? Yeah, probably, but they weren't. So it goes in the win column for the Lions, and every team has benefited from somebody that wasn't there. Do you want to beat them at full power? Of course. But if they're not, hey, take the win and keep it moving. That's really all you can do. So they, the thing with Goff and the thing that worries me going into this game is Goff may not be that top tier elite guy, but he is a seasoned vet and a good passer. So if you have a situation like the Seahawks do right now, where they have a defensive end that's hurt and they have basically half of their linebacking core that is injured and either didn't practice or it had limited practice, really outside of Bobby Wagner, everybody had something going on. And so if you look at the blueprint that Stafford set last week, where he threw everything through the middle and short in that window where those linebackers are supposed to live, that is absolutely the same type of play that Goff can do. And they have a team that can do exactly that. So I would actually look for the Lions to follow exactly what the Rams did, because it worked all game and they didn't have an answer for it. If you're watching film and you're the Lions, you have a team that can exploit those same holes in this defense. So that's really what I'm looking for there. The offensive line should perform a little bit better than it did against the Rams, although the Lions defense is considerably better than it was last year. You got to remember last year they were the worst defense in the league. So this year they are taking a step forward. They added some pieces, which, good on them, but they're not going to be the Aaron Donald style pass rush where he's potentially coming free and Geno has to throw it in the dirt. I think he's going to have a little bit better command of the offense, and that offensive line is probably going to, perform a little bit better. I hope you are right. I really hope that my pick is wrong this week, because although I picked the Lions as an analyst, as a Seahawks fan, I want the Hawks to win. So I really hope you're right. So let's see. So Goff can definitely pick a defense apart if you're just leaving open areas. So if they're going to end up playing a lot of zone like they did last week, the linebacker situation that we had really didn't pick those zones up very well. And again, that's where all of those catches were really coming from. And, they put up a ton of yards on 10 to 15 yard throws. So that is a major concern to me. Let's see, we got despite all the injuries in the linebacking core, I do think they're going to be able to cover the middle of the field a little bit better. But again, we'll see what this game plan works out to be. I'm almost curious if they're going to switch out of that zone and do a little bit more man, or do something like a cover 2 man where you have the safeties over the top still, but your corners that are manned up, something to help this out, because you can't give up that many passes through the middle of the field. I do think our running game should be able to be better against the Lions. Not that it was bad. They did rush for right at 100 yards. So it's not like our running game was bad, but I think it'll be better against this defense of the Lions, just because they don't have the guys up front that the Rams have, despite the fact that everybody thought the Rams are going to be tanking and, they're going to be a 6-win team. They always play Seattle tough. They generally split with them. And their defense is formidable still. So that's something that the Lions just don't quite have yet. They're moving in that direction, but they won all those games last year, not because their defense was elite. It was because they were a top 5 scoring offense, and they didn't lose a ton of pieces in that scoring offense. So this is going to be a nail biter for sure. Again, I don't think it's going to be the second half blowout that happened last week, but it is something that I believe Vegas's line on this was 5.5, and that is probably about right. I think the Lions ultimately take this with it's probably going to be a field goal type of game, which is more or less, how it came down last year. I don't think it'll be quite as high scoring as last year. As I recall, there was almost 90 points scored last year. So I don't think it's going to be that type of game, but I do think that the Hawks will have their handful going to Detroit. So yeah, we didn't have a lot of questions this week. Normally we have more. This is one where a lot of the things that came in weren't really questions. They were just messages of sadness. So I just want to send this reminder. It's week 1. Calm down. Week 1s are bad for a lot of teams. If you looked around the league, there was a whole lot that didn't go right for tons of people. If you're a Giants fan, outside of that one dude that was walking out of the stadium and threw his jersey on the ground, you live to play another week, right? So there's a lot of football left. I still think that the Hawks end up in second place in the West. And, at the beginning of the year, I figured the Rams would split with the Hawks anyway. So I just thought it was going to be on the opposite end. But, again, I have the Hawks still as a 10-win team, despite an ugly first week loss. And they should be able to get that wild card spot. So relax. We're going to be okay. Use that Aaron Rodgers, relax. It'll be fine. They do need to have a good showing in Detroit. I had them slated to win that game, but even if they don't, it needs to be competitive. We need to see steps forward in the units that were so bad through last season and really last week. And that'll be the biggest thing to watch is, can this defensive front seven recover from a bad week one, because it was such a liability last year and, really was an issue yesterday. Because, I mean, they didn't have to run a lot and they still got, 92 yards. That, unfortunately, is kind of where we are going into this week. But I do think it's a winnable game for the Hawks, but they have to play really disciplined ball. And I think their defensive scheme needs to change a little bit in order to stay competitive in this game, simply because Goff can absolutely pick a team apart if he has time and if you're playing a real soft zone. But, other than that, I want to make sure that I thank our sponsor, El Calhoun. It is a Peruvian restaurant down there in Pike Place Market. Go down there Wednesday through Sunday, 4 to 9 p.m. Try some Peruvian food. Say hi to Linda for me. She is awesome. And other than that, we're going to let you get back to your beautiful Friday here in the Northwest. Hopefully it's nice where you are as well. Other than that, thanks for tuning in. Whatever network you happen to be watching it on, whether it's mine, Let's Talk Sports, Hardcore Sports. Oh, man, I should have wrote them all down. I messed up. All right. Thanks for absolutely. Go Hawks. All right. Enjoy the rest of your Friday, guys. I'll get you out of here right now.